2025. And did Mark Carney resign from the board of Stripe? It doesn't seem so, and I've got some receipts to show you, websites and images, screenshots, to look at that further. I think that's interesting, and there's lots of scandals around Mark Carney we'll talk about today. The polls say he's going to win, surging. Remember Joe Biden? Randy Hillier is going to talk to us about that. We'll start there. They're trying to diminish the importance of leaders' debates. So I've seen multiple news articles, and I'll show you one, saying, oh, leaders' debate, Schmieder's debate. Who needs a leaders' debate? It's all just, big pony show anyway. It doesn't matter. And I mean, they're right, because they're excluding anyone who may speak the truth, like Maxime Bernier. Do the leaders debate matter? It's going to be gummed up with people talking about nonsense for an hour, and you won't get any real content anyway. I think probably a better use of everyone's time would be long form podcast conversations with people, but that's not something that's really going to happen in Canada because we don't do that very often. Sometimes, I guess, but I haven't seen it doesn't seem to be taking off the way it was taking off in the United States and Canada. So that's interesting. Poilievre did a interview with Ben Mulrooney, but I mean, does that really count? That's just legacy media doing a longer form podcast in a different format. And I mean, it was Ben Mulrooney's radio show podcast thing. So does it even really count? I'm not sure. Anyway, regardless. Big endorsements for Poilievre, big endorsements. All the big business people are endorsing Poilievre, and there are people who are saying, hey, if Mark Carney is such a hotshot banker, how come all the endorsements went to Poilievre? And so you're not hearing that. You're just hearing, oh my gosh, it looks like Poilievre's going to lose. One way or the other, things, I keep saying the elections look rigged, and I think that they're rigged. But it seems like an argument can be made, and Randy Hillier is going to make the argument now, that the polls are reflecting reality, and this whole election is going to be over before Ontario is done voting, right? And so there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, Randy Hillier says, Canadians don't understand that unlike in the United States, we don't have one election for the executive prime minister, but 343 elections. The popular vote means diddly squat in Canadian elections. The Conservatives need to win 100 of those ridings east of Manitoba to have a shot, and that's not happening, he says. The election will be called before polls close in Manitoba. This is what the polls are showing. For Conservatives to ever win, they need to have a competitive NDP in every riding east of Manitoba and a competitive bloc in Quebec. Jagmeet Singh's failure amplifies Pierre's election failures. Vote your conscience, Carney will be king at 9 p.m. Eastern on April 28th, says Randy Hillier. And so I don't mean to give you bad news this morning, but I read that and I was like, oh man, even though I look at, this is 338 Canada, and I feel like this is nanos. These are polls that are deeply, deeply flawed, and I'll show you how flawed they are right now. Deeply flawed polls, but I don't think that matters. And the reason I don't think that matters is because I lived through the 2020 election when I saw huge turnouts for Trump, people chanting, "We love you," to a politician, Donald Trump, nonetheless. And that doesn't happen for politicians. And I saw that. And he lost bigly to the guy who couldn't turn out a crowd, right? So super interesting, super weird. Do I think this is plausible? Heck yeah, I think it's plausible. I think they're trying to sell it. I think they're trying to say, oh yeah, it's going to happen because Pierre's deeply, deeply unpopular or has a woman problem or whatever it is. And they're just trying to sell a narrative, and they're using any tool possible to sell that narrative. But that doesn't change, well, what happened in 2020. Biden was announced, selected, and that was that. And what did the American people do? They allowed him to govern, because what are you going to do, right? And so what would happen in Canada if Carney gets selected? What do you think? Here's the deeply flawed polls I was talking about. This guy says, I've been contemplating over the past few days, and it's time to tell you these riding polls from Canada or Cardinal Research are far from legit. In fact, they're the most egregious, quote, polls I've ever seen in my life. And you've got a sample size, and the polls don't add up, I think. He's got things circled. He says, let's start with the most egregious example. In the April 2nd riding poll for Eglinton Lawrence, they reported an overall support of 55% for Liberals in the riding, 61% among men and 71% among women. That is simply mathematically impossible. Okay, so that's interesting. Doesn't add up. They use the same sample size for deciding and for decided and undecided panels. Most other pollsters who reduce the sample size for decided by excluding undecided. So usually these sample sizes go down. And also these sample sizes are 1,000, right? Like these polls are not worth their salt at all. Like they're not worth looking at. They're not legitimate. They don't reflect anything other than the bias of the 1,000 people that were polled. It's not representative of Canada. It doesn't matter if they weighted it. 1,000 people is not enough. He continues, almost every other pollster have smaller sample sizes for decided voters compared to undecided voters, right? So total and then total decided, total 1,600 and decided 1,300, right? And change. He continues, Cardinal Research claims they conducted 2 batches of riding polls, March 27 to April 2nd, 14,000 and change response across 20 ridings. And then the second one from April 2nd to April 9,000 and change response across 12 ridings. That's 24,000 people and 32 ridings conducted in 13 days. Keep in mind, most major polling companies cannot afford to conduct targeted polls in one riding with over 500 samples due to small population and size of a riding, let alone 32 ridings in 13 days. The worst example being Surrey Centre. Cardinal Research claims 1,638 responses in 7 days. Even assuming a generous 10% response rate, that requires contacting and identifying at least 16,000 people in one riding, a massive effort for a small firm run by one person. It's unlikely, right? Unlikely. Curtis Frick, owner of Polling Canada. So there you go. Does he look a little young to you? I don't know. I watch Phineas and Ferb because it's a fantastic show, and they constantly ask them, like, aren't you a little young to be building a roller coaster in your backyard? And they always say, yes, we are. Carrying on. This guy continues, these polls are so egregious that an anonymous source from a polling firm contacted me yesterday complaining about their flaws and violations of polling ethics and standards, leading me to release this thread. How is Curtis Frick conducting these polls? He's using a dartboard and he's putting people's picture on the dartboard, and he just throws the dart 100 times or 1,000 times, and then you got your data, buddy. No problem. Sometimes he closes his eyes when he throws the dart. Other times he doesn't, right? Sometimes he's standing. Other times he's sitting, depending on where in the 1,000 throws he's at. 1,000 throws, come on. According to another anonymous source, he's paying political party canvassers to collect data at the door during election canvassing as a side quest. That's what the door-to-door polling method he claimed actually is. Ooh. Furthermore, the polls lack detailed methodology explanations and fail to follow the CRIC public opinion research standards and disclosure requirements. What Curtis Frick is harming is the reputation of the polling industry and should be condemned. So, and that's just one example. There are other egregious examples of ridiculous polling, but the polls saying Mark Carney's in the lead could be fake, but it might not matter because the elections are rigged. CPC Watcher is highlighting this, and the main point of this is that it looks like the Conservatives are actually ahead, but I'll just read this. It says, for the first time on CBC this election, we see an honest question about the polling results we're seeing. And it took Eli Glasner, an entertainment reporter, moving into hosting duties to ask it of talking head Lori Turnbull. I think we did see that happen in the American election, where there was a base of support for Trump that didn't seem to be communicated to the polls. And there was an indication in the polls that it would be a very close race between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And then come election night, it wasn't close at all. Too bad Cochrane can't admit this. So on one side of things, you've got Randy Hillier saying, I mean, it's too late. They've already lost. The whole jig is up. We're not on track for a Conservative win whatsoever, not even close. And then you've got also, hey, you remember that Donald Trump, Kamala Harris thing where the polls said Kamala Harris was a lock and Hillary Clinton was a lock? And actually what happened was Donald Trump destroyed them in the polls and won quite handily, or destroyed them in the only poll that matters, which is the election night poll, and won quite handily, right? So like, interesting. The Remanded is talking about this, tracking 12 accounts, 45th election, and Polymart. Looking through 190 transactions over $10,000, we've noted 12 accounts holding positions over $50,000. This isn't complete, as it'll be harder to track the biggest positions in totals, as whale accounts may due to rapid fire smaller transactions and somewhat hide their overall position. In total, we have 12 accounts. No to Pierre is 1.3 million, and yes to Carney is 300,000, a total of 1.7 million against Pierre. These account statistics total 5 million in trade value. Volume trade totals 300,000 and change. I don't know exactly what that means. Market trade total 99699. I don't know that that's money. I don't think that that's money. I think the monetary value is up here. One account has a net loss of $1 million, but has the biggest bet on these 12 in the Canadian election for prime minister. This isn't to say these are the biggest whales as we dive deep. More to come, and he says we keep going. So this guy's one of the guys who is looking into the BC election and looking at it and seeing that it was there were concerning questions about the legitimacy of the numbers and so on and so forth. And it's interesting that he's looking at these accounts. And Polymart, one of the tactics of the Communist Chinese Party is to use organized crime to influence betting markets to then influence the election, because betting markets influence what people think because they think it's a truer poll than the bullshit polls we see published, right? And so it's interesting because this follows that, and what he's pointing out is a lot of money going to swing Polymart, or Polymarket, excuse me, to look like Poilievre's going to lose. Very interesting. Here is CTV News, and they say James Moore says leaders debates have come to mean less and less. Who needs a leaders debate? Who even wants to see a leaders debate these days, right? Very interesting. I mean, having a round table would be interesting, or having like a round robin round table where like you have Pierre and Carney have a discussion with the moderator and they get the same questions as like Jagmeet Singh and Blanchette do. And then after that, there's like a second round where Pierre would go up against. It doesn't matter. It'd be boring. It'd be boring. Like, honestly, it would be boring. It would just be better to have direct questions back and forth rather than have a debate with 5 or 6 people on the stage. Like, it's like I said it years ago with Bernier as well. It's like a washing machine. Like, it's designed to not answer any questions at all, and they just sling mud and say nonsense, really. Got to get into the elections, so let's talk about the Conservative Party first. Pierre got a whole bunch of big endorsements yesterday, and Robert Fife says some very big heavy hitters in the business community endorsed Pierre Poilievre. Ben Mulrooney says this is, in my opinion, the most significant endorsement for Pierre Poilievre in the Conservative Party yet. Do your own research into the signatories and their respective companies. These are Canadian titans who have for decades invested in our communities and helped build our community. And so this is the list of names, and I'm not going to go through all the names. You can check it out. Link should be in the description, or you can just go to the X post on the screen here. But there's, the who's who of businesses. There's all sorts of hedge funds. There's managing partner of the Leaders Fund, Birchcliff Energy, president and CEO of Orla Mining, CEO of Metropia, founder and manager and partner of Mavericks Private Equity, president Genal Investments, former CEO PwC Canada, former chair Conference Board of Canada, president and CIO Midland Group of Companies, president and CEO Main Street Equity Corporation, former president and CEO of Scotiabank. They locked people's accounts, by the way. They froze people's accounts. Just saying. Right, Scotiabank, your bank account's more frozen than you think. Cheers. So founder Chu Associates, chairman and founder of Burgundy Assets Management. So the Dawesco Group, right? So all of these heavy hitters are endorsing Pierre Poilievre, and people are noticing. National Citizens Coalition says this dropped in every major Canadian newspaper. Canada's greatest innovators and business leaders have come together to endorse Pierre Poilievre. This is huge. It's a big endorsement, really is. Food Professor says more than 30 major business leaders are endorsing the Conservatives and urging Canadians to vote for real change on April 28th. Impressive list. Met and know several of them, but aside from Bill Gregson, formerly of the food service sector, not a single executive from the agri-food industry is included. Telling. So the supply management people are nervous, maybe. Telling. Thank you, Ben Mulrooney, for sharing. So there's that. And Brett says Poilievre was asked if he would make any changes to Trudeau's MAID, and he says he wouldn't make any changes. and that we need to fast track immigrant doctors to have license to practice in Canada. Interesting pivot. Is he talking specifically about MAID? How do you get licensed to deliver MAID? Can you put a MAID facility in your house? You know, like, oh, I've made this very comfortable closet here. Welcome to your deathbed, right? Ta-da! I've monetized my house, right? And no, it's still very strange to me that you can enter into a contract with the government to have them kill you. Like, you can't hire an assassin, and I'm not advocating to hire an assassin unless the assassin is the government for you, right? Like, hello government, yes, I'd like to call in a hit. It's the same as when you make an appointment to have your pet euthanized. It's very much like calling in a hit. Like, don't forget the cannoli, buddy. We're going. Let's go. Okay, here's this.
I want to ask you about Canada's medical assistance in dying laws. Will the Conservative government make any changes to the laws that exist in this country right now? And are you open to expanding them to include advanced directives?
Thank you for your question. People will continue to have the right to make that choice, the choice for themselves. We are not proposing to expand medical assistance in dying beyond the existing parameters. That said, we believe that we also need better health care so that people have all sorts of options. For example, we've announced that we're going to be bringing in a blue seal that will allow us to license the 20,000 immigrant doctors and 32,000 immigrant nurses who are already qualified but not able to practice. By having a blue seal that is based on the red seal we have for the licensed trades, we believe we can accelerate many of those qualified doctors to take a test, prove they're qualified up to our standards, and then get licensed to work in our hospitals, reducing the incredible wait times that we see right across our country. After the lost Liberal decade, there's something like 6 million Canadians who do not have a family doctor.
So we're just waiting, stacking them up on MAID. I'm just kidding. Interesting pivot, right? Yeah, we're going to bring in as many doctors as we need to work on the backlog of patients needing care. I don't know. Is that what you want to see? Is that how you want to solve that problem? Could we solve it in a different way, a more creative way? Is there a better system, a different mix that we could use, right? Is there a European model better than our current implementation of healthcare? And I think that there is an argument that could be made. And if the Conservatives can't do it, then who will? Who will do it? Right? Jeepers creepers. Here's Cat Turd. He's responding to Pierre Poilievre. Poilievre is attacking Donald Trump. Poilievre says, I'm incredibly saddened by the layoffs at the GM Cami assembly plant in Ingersoll. This morning I spoke with Unifor Local 88 GM plant chairperson Mike Van Boek and expressed my commitment to protect Canadian auto workers. And now I've got information here. Like, here is Anita Anand is responding to this whole thing as well. But Doug Ford says, here's Siobhan. She says, I think it's Siobhan, yeah. She says, Premier Ford tells CTV's Mike Walker that he's spoken to GM Canada's president, who says the Cami plant changes are because of low demand, not tariffs. Ford calls on agencies like Canada Post, with its own issues, of course, to order more of the electric vans that the plant makes. So, bail us out, guys. So it has nothing to do with the tariffs. And I think that it's interesting that Pierre Poilievre is using this opportunity to, well, he's saying he's going to protect Canadian workers. Does he say anything about Donald Trump? Let's carry on and read the rest of the statement. We will keep them working so they can keep their jobs, and we will fight as we fight through this mess, a Conservative government. That I think he's implying here that is the tariffs that are at fault. A Conservative government will push hard to put an end to these tariffs and get a quick but fair deal that protects our sovereignty and our economy. Conservatives will be there for the auto workers in Ingersoll, Oshawa, Cambridge, Brampton, Windsor, Essex, St. Catharines, Oakville, Alliston, and Woodstock. President Trump is betraying America's closest friend and attacking our economy. We must strengthen our economy and end our reliance on the United States. I will stand up for Canada and protect our auto workers by axing the GST on Canadian-made cars and providing temporary liquidity to companies affected by these tariffs through the Keep Canadians Working Fund. So yes, he is attacking Trump. And Catchard says, lost a 30-point lead, continues to attack Trump. This guy just isn't that bright. So Womp womp, right? I think that's pretty interesting. Son of a Bench says CTV has a story. This is a different side of the election campaign that's ongoing, and this is how they're utilizing different ways to take out popular conservative candidates, well-known conservative candidates. So down ticket, when you've got people who, I mean, Aaron Gunn is famous in his own right. He does documentaries, great documentaries, and he's used Poilievre's platform to not necessarily as a platform to grow his own audience, but that's been the result, because he's worked on a lot of videos that Poilievre has released. There was a drug one that was like 12 minutes or something like that, and Aaron, you can see his production all over it, right? Like you can see it. He's come in and done a bunch of work for the Conservative Party, and so that has put his name in more people's front of mind, right? And so now they're trying to take him down using petitions, going after what he's said that is real. So reality doesn't matter. It's how well you adhere to the fake narrative. It's how well you adhere to the story we've all agreed is real, even though there's no evidence to back it up. Right? And that's really crazy. So Son of a Bench says CTV has a story about the petition to get rid of North Island Powell River Conservative candidate Aaron Gunn, claiming 15,000 people have signed the petition. This is due to previous comments Gunn has made about residential schools. Thoughts. So petition to remove controversial conservative candidate reaches 15,000 signatures. And then here's the Lead Now petition. And he says, here's the petition to Pierre Poilievre to remove Aaron Gunn. And so it's interesting, because I don't think that Aaron Gunn is speaking falsehoods. I don't think that what he's saying is incorrect. He's saying there's not been any bodies, and so on and so forth. And they're saying saying this is harmful to First Nations, and I think that it's not. And they're saying it's so harmful it should disqualify him from running in this election. So I think that that's interesting. Here's more election interference, I would say. And this is the Google My Business profile for a conservative candidate in Barrie, and it's John O. And it says his office is permanently closed. So you can report a business as permanently closed, and Google will believe you, because it's one of those things where usually things like this aren't weaponized against people or businesses. And so Google takes their word for it. Oh, 10 people have said this business is closed. I guess it's probably closed. And so they say it's closed, and that's that. And so I think that's like very interesting. And so I see this, that his business profile page for his campaign office is closed. And this guy says, I live in the area, and as per all the lawn signs, John Brassard CPC will get reelected. So interesting, right? So I don't know why the different name, but very interesting stuff going on, because I think that kind of stuff is done on purpose. It's almost low-hanging fruit if you can get a bunch of an army of bored people who are in front of a computer and don't have anything else to do, right? And so like people should have their own projects. Jeepers creepers. CTV News is reporting Poilievre accuses Carney of hiding as Liberal leader wraps up third week of campaigning with no public events. Yeah, he's been absent from the campaign trail for a couple of days. Not surprising, but it's one of those things where it's noticeable. And if you're trying to run for leadership of the country and you keep getting mad at the reporters for asking legitimate questions, I mean, I guess hiding seems like a viable option, but it shouldn't be tolerated by the Canadian public who have to elect somebody. John, and it's very strange that while he's hiding, his poll numbers go up. John says, interesting observation. Carney and his supporters all call him an experienced banker, then explain why all the bank CEOs strongly endorse Pierre Poilievre and not Carney. So at the beginning of the show, we were talking about the big endorsement. The reason I read out kind of the names of the places these CEOs represent is because to give you an idea of who these endorsements are coming from. And these people who are involved in finance, involved in that kind of side of the world, in that world, are endorsing not Mark Carney. And that's noticeable because he's supposed to be some big shot banker. And it seems like the big shot bankers who are running things now aren't endorsing Carney. And that's noticeable, right? If there are endorsements that I've missed, send them my way. But it's interesting, right? I'm sure Carney's getting his own endorsements, but I'll look and see who he's saying that people have endorsed him. I don't think that'll carry the weight he's hoping. Liberal Party says, what's your voting plans? Andy Lee says, I'm going to register the newly created state of Alberta as a corporation in Bermuda and liberate us. And I thought that was pretty funny. Good job, Andy Lee. Sometimes Twitter's just a little bit of genius, right? Just boom. It's the perfect response at the perfect time. Martin says, let's talk about Brookfield Asset Management. This 2015 report outlines all companies in Brookfield Asset Management Holdings. See snapshot of a couple pages of the companies in holdings. There's 35 pages of corporate entities in Brookfield Asset Management portfolio. This person is credited with coming up with this information, and you can get the pages here. But it's very interesting, the potential conflict of interests, and Carney's fingerprints are all over it, right? And it's one of those things where all of those conflicts, all of these companies potentially have leverage isn't the right word, but if they're moved into a position of making money and Carney is at the center of it, like how many of those have to do with heat pumps? How many of those have to do with solar panels and so on and so forth? So as prime minister, Carney's in a conflict, even though he's got blind trusts. If you owned Brookfield and you say, listen, blind trust, I want to continue having a heavy stake in this company, then you just open things up and see how things are going. I don't know. I'm very, very skeptical that Carney can escape conflict in this case, especially with such a long list. But I mean, I could be wrong. Here is Jay. He says, why, oh, why is China supporting Mark Carney? This is from Canada Proud. It goes through it. We'll listen to a minute. Here we go.
Why is the government of China actively promoting Mark Carney's campaign? Mark Carney says he has no idea.
Absolutely no idea, and I have absolutely no idea, and I think I'll leave it at that.
But when you look into it, the reasons become pretty obvious. For years, Mark Carney has called for China to have more dominance over the global economy.
One of the many strengths of China is their perspective.
And it'll be important that China is center stage to shape this new global, sustainable financial system.
We see China's leadership there in deployment of AI technologies, which is in many respects unique, and we can all learn from that.
While running Brookfield, Carney put his views into practice, significantly expanding the company's operations in China. And shortly before leaving the company to run for prime minister, Carney took out a $250 million loan from the Bank of China. And he's continued to promote China's interests on the campaign trail. He's promoted the industrial carbon tax, which will help destroy industrial jobs in Canada and ship them to China. He's offered no plan to crack down on criminal gangs, including gangs directed by foreign governments to intimidate immigrants on our soil. He refused to fire an MP who called for his opponent to be handed over to the Chinese consulate for a bounty until the RCMP got involved.
$1 million reward on his head. So they want, if you guys want to pick him up and take him to the Chinese consulate, you make him $1 million.
And after that, he just got a new candidate who is also openly pro-China. And now, in the midst of China promoting his campaign, Carney refuses to condemn their actions. Share this video so that Canadians...
There you go. We'll leave it there. So pretty crazy stuff, right? Questions abound. And again, I wonder how this guy could be surging in the polls. I don't understand how that makes any sense other than the polls are not exactly above board. Larry Brox is sharing this. This is a Liberal candidate talking about house arrest. Under house arrest, you can have a job, maybe, presumably. Is somebody paying you a per diem rate or something like that? Like, thanks for not being in jail. Here's $50 a day to pay for your food from Uber Eats. Like, I don't know exactly how it works out. And so it's interesting that the Liberal candidate is framing it as a cost savings. Maybe it is. Maybe the cost is just shifted. Maybe it's not so much a cost savings, rather a cost shifting. And again, it seems like their main goal is to have dangerous people out on the streets rather than in a controlled setting where they can't access public places and harm people. Larry Brock says, Mark Carney's handpicked Liberal candidate says the quiet part out loud. They think that locking up dangerous criminals is too expensive. Carney's hug-a-thug Liberal team already voted to give house arrest to arsonists, car thieves, kidnappers, even those convicted of sexual assault. On April 28th, Canadians will make a choice, a fourth Liberal term of more crime and chaos, or a Canada First Conservative government that locks up criminals and puts victims first, keeping our streets safe for a change.
And while Eric over here is opposed to having people on house arrest, we do have to acknowledge the fact that our prison system is incredibly costly. Housing somebody within the prison system is a huge burden on taxpayers versus having them on house arrest, for instance. And while Eric over here is...
Do we really want those people on house arrest? I don't think so. Ron Unfiltered says Mark Carney says he's resigned from Stripe, but the government of Hawaii says otherwise. These aren't just screenshots. They're official government records from the state of Hawaii's corporate registry, updated daily as of April 10th, 2025. That's Friday. In these filings, I think it's Friday or Thursday. In these filings, Mark Carney is still legally listed as a director of Stripe, Inc., alongside Stripe's most recent annual corporate filing submitted on December 3rd, 24, months after he publicly claimed to have stepped down. Here's why that matters. When someone resigns from a company board, it's not official until the company files a formal change within the government. That change must be submitted and recorded in public filings, just like these ones. If no resignation filing appears, the individual is still legally considered a director under the U.S. corporate law. So if Mark Carney really did resign, why hasn't Stripe filed the proper paperwork to remove him? Until that happens, he's still officially part of Stripe on paper and in law. This isn't speculation. It's verified legal documentation pulled directly from Hawaii's government business registry. So I went to the website and I went to the Stripe Inc., but I have to log in to look at the directors and officers. Okay, there's 14. It says log in to see this data. So good directory website there. But in order to see the data, this guy is logged in. Right there it is. And he is showing the last change recorded April 10th, 2025. And here's Mark Carney, second from the top. It's under directors. It says directors, CT Corporation System, Mark Carney. And it says director since October 1st, 2023. And it doesn't have an end date. So current director. Okay? So you can check that out if you're interested. Link is in the description. Weird, right? Super duper weird. Here is another one. This person says 15th Asian Financial Forum, Belt and Road Global Forum has Mark Carney and FTX's Sam Bankman-Fried discuss building a sustainable financial system, and Asia becomes the engine of sustainable development. 12/22, FTX goes bankrupt. So, Yaza, that was in January of the 2022. By December, FTX goes bankrupt. And 2024, 25 years in prison for Bankman-Fried. Wow, that's a long time in prison. I did not think he was going to go to jail. I really didn't. Here's Suk Dhaliwal, and this kind of pairs up with the crackdown on crime and things, different ways of looking at it. These people, these liberals, have had a decade to do what they are claiming they're going to do now, and they didn't do it. In fact, they made it orders of magnitude worse. They doubled the housing price. They've let out dangerous criminals. They've normalized tent cities and open drug use and in fact given out drugs to people. It caused all sorts of problems. It's ridiculous. Anyway, Suk Dhaliwal says a Mark Carney-led government will hire thousands of new RCMP personnel and CBSA officers to crack down on illegal drugs and guns coming from the United States, increase funding to prosecute violent criminal gangs, make bail laws stricter, and protect children and community spaces. I don't believe them. I think that if they're hiring RCMP and CBSA officials, that they're going to start looking at your taxes and saying, hold on a second here, this is not above board or whatever. And then they're going to throw you in jail, right? Like, I don't trust these people whatsoever. And maybe I should, but I don't see any reason to. They've lied and they've lied and they've lied about investigations. They've done piss poor jobs at investigations. They've not told the truth to the citizens about what's going on. People get shuffled out and things get lost. And I mean, I don't think we're any better now than we were under Lucky. So no, I don't trust these institutions because they have not been behaving in a trustworthy way. So I think that's on them. It's not on me to trust these institutions when they're behaving so shady, right? Melissa Lanceman says the Liberal candidate for Barrie South says that we should give up on manufacturing in Canada. And what's worse is he said it only a few weeks before becoming a candidate. And he says, quote, we should just partner with China and other nations and give up on manufacturing. Like, that's not good. Trump is trying to do the exact opposite, right? And we can't replace the American market for the Chinese. It's just not going to work. Even if we make move all our manufacturing to China, it's just not going to work. Here is 2 minutes of Maxime Bernier's PPC in, where is this? I think it's in Niagara South. And he gets a big applause by the audience. Here we go.
I want to talk about the attack from within, the government's attack against its citizens. Without free speech, there is no security. Bill C-63 is a direct attack against free speech in Canada. This law purports to prevent harm to children, which of course everyone would agree with. But what it does, it criminalizes people hurting other people's feelings. This law wants to create another layer of bureaucracy in which bureaucrats are left to decide what speech is or is not criminal. The PPC will protect free speech by repealing Bill C-63. C-4, which became law on December 8, 2021, is an attack against children, their parents, the family, and against truth itself. This law legalized the gender transitioning of children and criminalizes parents who try to discourage their own children from gender transitioning if the parents oppose the state. I want to quote directly from the preamble from C-4, which states, including the myth that gender expression that conforms to the sex assigned to a person at birth are to be preferred over other gender expressions. Every single MP read this and voted in favor of this law, which is an inversion of reality. After voting in favor of C-4, Pierre Poilievre then made videos, gave speeches, and spoke to supporters that he opposes the gender transitioning of children after he voted to legalize it. Politicians that try to play both sides of an issue are a danger to Canada, as they illustrate they are only interested in power and not principles. Our government is doing everything possible to suppress our leader, Maxime Bernier, from participating in the national leaders debate. Max met all the criteria to participate in the debate, but our government changed the criteria in order to exclude Max from the debate. 840,000 Canadians are being censored when our leader is not allowed to speak at this debate.
Big applause. It's good. It's good. People are engaged, and I thought his speech was really good. We've got to talk about tariffs, and then we're going to go international. Do I have time for tariffs 37? I got to cut off the stream. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll be doing a kitchen table talk today. I'll be sending out the email soon, and we'll catch you tomorrow. And for everybody else, hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful